So good morning, everybody. I have to apologize. I have I have too many slides. But what I want to discuss is mainly the background of sustainable forest management and the way we are doing ecosystem management in Canada and especially in Quebec. So it's more the process than the specific data that I want to present. So I'll go faster probably on the slide where there's a lot of data. Oops. Okay. So in Canada, the Minister of Forests meet together in the 1990 and define a certain number of the criteria for sustainable forest management. And I put in green the criteria that mainly deal with the environmental issue. And we had a big group of researchers in Canada that developed kind of a working hypothesis on how we could attain those criteria. And we decide to work on this idea that natural disturbance was the way that the forest was controlled naturally, and that we should try to develop a way of logging or managing the forest in such a way that it emulates the natural disturbance that that would take place in the past in the natural forest. And it was very popular, and a lot of province in Canada has developed systems that are based on this new paradigm of natural disturbance. And following this period of research, we published a book where we put a definition of ecosystem management for the boreal forest. And I just read it. It's a management approach that aims to maintain healthy and resilient forest ecosystem by focusing on the reduction of difference between natural and managed landscape. In fact, it's a very pragmatic way of seeing the problem, because we all know that it's probably impossible to emulate the natural disturbance, but we want to decrease the gap between forest management and natural disturbance. And just to show what was very popular at that time, it was a integrated management and ecosystem management. The difference is that rather than sharing the outcome of the forest, which is economic or environment and all the service, it's be sure that we will grow the tree and everybody will have access to the resource. Another way to see it, it will maintain biodiversity. If we keep natural ecosystem, it seems that all the biodiversity will be keeping in something that is so different but obviously there's a way to adapt. So in fact, all this process was really successful in Quebec. It's interesting because we changed the Forest Act in 2010. And in the Forest Act, it was to mention that we should implant sustainable forest development, in particular through ecosystem-based development. And the ecosystem-based development mean, and then you have about the same definition. Try to decrease the gap between natural disturbance and forest management. So the process, I just want to go through the step of the process. So the first thing you need to reconstruct natural disturbance. So we're useful, paleoecologists, ecologists, everybody who is working on natural disturbance is now useful, because we have first to better understand how it works, and then to compare that to manage landscape and identify what are the main issue that, so the main difference between natural and managed landscape, and develop a new management plan and implement those plans and monitor after what happened. And of course, we have to take into account that it should be socially acceptable and economically possible. So I'll give you example with fire at the natural disturbance, but it could apply to other disturbance and other area. So probably some of you have already seen that, but if we look at the natural range of variability that we can have with fire, we have the fire at different interval, fire that cover a few hectares or 1,000 of a square kilometer, and it could burn all the soil, kill all the tree, or just have a small effect. So it creates a natural range of variability, and we want to possibly not be outside the natural range of variability, but maybe not have all the variability that exists in the landscape. So that's so then if we look what we were doing, because we have to say that we have moved now, but if we look at what we were doing at the beginning, say in the 1990 before, we mainly in Quebec and in most part of Canada clear cut as the only way of manage the forest. And we have this clear cut with where we protect the natural regeneration in such a way that we don't have to replant all the site, but that some of the site will. But so it gives you an idea of what it looks like. And but the problem is that we start with few hectares and then you increase to more hectares, and finally you have these huge area in the pale green, which represent a logging front from south to north. The area that are in violet, it's the big fire that occur in this part of the boreal. So there was a kind of a modern myth at that time, is that given that boreal forest is controlled by fire, large-scale clear cutting with short rotation would emulate natural disturbance, which of course is not the case. And the major issue or the major gap between natural and managed forests is the decrease of old growth forest. So and there's other issue. I'll go probably faster for the other. But so the work we've done over the year was to reconstruct the fire history in several areas in Quebec. And here you have an example of a 10,000 square kilometer reconstruction of a time since fire over an area that is just close between Ontario and the Quebec border. That goes from boreal mixedwood to in the south to pure conifer boreal forest in the north, and the color represent the age of the stand after fire. And another way to look at that is just to put an histogram like that, where you have the proportion that come from the different times since fire, and we can see that there's more than 50% of the stand that are over 100 years, and even 23% that is over 200 years. And of course, if we clear cut the area, we will change the age structure of the landscape, where you will have a forest rotation on 100 years. You have these red bar now, and we would lose a lot of the over mature and old growth forests. So, and this is the same in all parts of Canada. If we look at the older study that were done by older researchers, we see that there's place in Canada where there is less old growth forest. But even in Alberta or BC or Saskatchewan, where it's burned as crazy, there's a good part of the old growth forest. The good news is that there's a change in the fire cycle. We could debate on the fact if it's due to fire suppression, but my strong belief, at least for Eastern Canada, it's clearly climate change. We went from a period where we had more fire during the Little Ice Age, a period that ended at the mid-19th century, where we had more precipitation or a climate that was not a good climate for fire. So we have a short, a big decrease, a trend in decreasing fire frequency. So there is room to do clear cut to emulate fire, which is the good news, because we can emulate the pre-industrial landscape doing clear cut. But it's with the 70 to 100 year rotation, you cannot only do clear cut. You have to do something else because, and in some place, if you look at wood buffalo, for example, which is in northern Alberta, the fire is taking more wood than what is possible to be logged. So there's a competition between fire and forest management that is incredibly high. So why keeping old growth? That's the main hypothesis that we have. If you preserve the habitat, you will preserve if you preserve old growth, which is one of the important habitat, you will preserve the biodiversity. So it's the coarse filter. So in northern Quebec, what we have it's all black spruce. It's relatively simple, black spruce and jack pine, but the structure of the stand change with time. So it means the habitat change with time, and then old growth forest has attribute that you won't find in the young forests dominated by pine or spruce. So you have a change in structure. In some other area, you have a change in composition, but in that case, it's more a change in structure. And if we look at the biodiversity, we see that even after 200 years, we are still increasing the number of species. So it means that there's part of the biodiversity that is there. Often it's not the one that are really glamour. It's not the moose or the hare, but it's lichens, it's insect, it's mosses. But we don't want to lose that. So there are several strategies that could be implemented. One is to protect more of the land base, but then it means that there will be less forests accessible for forest management. If you increase the productivity in part of the land base, then you can keep more of the old growth forest. But of course, this approach is not always possible, especially in the forests of northern Canada, where it's very difficult to implement a lot of intensive forest management. You can wait longer. I mean, don't log at 70 year or 100 year, but let the stand go over, but then you will lose some of the wood. Or you can change the cutting practices, and it's probably the way that we tend to go, because it means that you can log the same amount of wood, but with different weight, some with clear cutting and to mimic fire, some with partial cutting to mimic natural succession, and even selection cut to mimic the gap dynamic in the old growth forest. So it's what was proposed for the black spruce forest, to have a part of the landscape where you would do clear cut, partial cut, or selection cutting. Of course, there's also the distribution of that. And if you look at the distribution of fire, they are distributed all over the landscape. If you look at the distribution of the cut, of course, they are at when the road finish, we cut and then we build the road. So we have to find a way to distribute the area that are cut. And that's obviously not the case. Now the practice has changed, and there's an obligation of distributing the forest in such a way that you have large area in regeneration, but large area also in mature, over mature, and old growth forest. And here is just an illustration. If you have a recent fire and very old fire, you could have area where you selectively cut, partially cut, and clear cut the land basin shut, such a way you keep the same thing. A fire doesn't burn all the land. There's a lot of area that is partly burned or skipped by the fire. And I have a year civil fire in 1995 and 1996, and you can see that in some cases it's 80% of the fire where you still have more living trees than dead trees. So it means that if you want to immolate a fire, you have to keep some green tree retention and it was not really what was done in the past. It was just to keep a band along the lake and small stream and river, which is different than what we have. But now we have a group tree or single tree retention in the clear cut. But the other one, the other issue, it's severity on soil, and this one is not very popular. I think it's everybody think that clear cutting is the same than a fire, but it's so different that it's something that it's very important. Of course, fire will burn someplace to the mineral soil, and someplace it will just leave a lot of organic matter, while logging it will generally leave a lot of organic matter, because especially in the we tend to log in the north, we tend to log during winter when the soil is frozen, so there's no disturbance of the soil, which is quite different than what happened. And in the place I live, in the clay belt in Canada, we have this process of paludification, which is very important, where times expand from fire. You have the development of invasion by mosses, feather moss, and then by sphanium. And then you have slowly a change from a close canopy forest to a bog. And fire was able to bring that back. What's interesting is to see that the first cohort of tree has access to the mineral soil, but the third cohort of tree grow in the organic matter. And there's a big change in the site index. You go from, you will say that 12 meter at 50 years, not that much, but that's the productive forest in Quebec. And you see that you can go to 4 meter at 50 year, which is clearly not commercial forest. Oops. Okay, so and of course it's enhanced because operations are during winter, and you can see here, we just look at the growth of black spruce after a summer clear cut, where you move a lot of, you disturb the soil, prescribed burning, a winter clear cut, and a careful logging where you take care of not disturbing the soil. And we see that the productivity is better when you move the soil. So I'll just end to this complex structure about what we should do and give as a basic is that if it's productive, if you have feather moss, if the forest can have a new rotation of tree that will have a good productivity, then you can do partial cutting or selection cutting. But then when you see that the sphanium is coming, then you have to be more hard with the system and bring that back with a clear cutting. I think in Finland you had this discussion with the famous work of Siren about going from partial to clear cut with all the discussion. I know that Thomas have already discussed that issue. So in conclusion, current forest management I must say was, but is still driving Eastern boreal forest outside its natural range of variability. And we have to diversify the silvicultural treatment. It should integrate structure. We tend to insist on structure, but also productivity, because on the long run, it's mainly the productivity that will create a problem. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Yves, for this very nice presentation. Is there any question on the room or online? Yeah.
On the map where you're showing the logging border, it looks like there's more fires above the logging border. Is that, do you know why? Like, is it to do with the forest management or other reasons?
Yeah, of course, there's two reasons. There's no fire suppression or less fire suppression in the north and in the south. But it's mainly because in many times, what come back after fire, after logging, is hardwood forest. And then hardwood forest is less prone to burn. And it creates all kind of problem, because then you're probably aware of the problem we have with the caribou, which is moving north, because as we increase the abundance of hardwood forest, we have the moose that is going northward, and the wolf that follow the moose, and then they tend to go on the caribou because they are more easy to kill. So I think the main reason is probably the abundance of hardwood.
Thank you for this excellent presentation. We breed always, for example, for wood quality and now for resistance to frost and droughts. Is it possible to breed for fire?
Yes, sure. I haven't mentioned that, but as we move north in Quebec, the fire cycle is coming shorter and shorter. And then the problem is that there's too much fire. And often what happens is that if you have successive fire, that occur in a short period of time, it means that even the tree, the jack pine and the black spruce that asserts in the cone, cannot regenerate because the tree doesn't have the cone. So I think it's good to select tree for growth, but it should be good to select tree to have cone earlier, because then you will decrease this problem. Because we are losing forests in the north now. And with climate change, unfortunately, fire will be more important, and then we could lose even more forests. So replanting, it costly. If it burned after and it doesn't come back, and you ended with the area without trees, it's not something very, very good.
Question online?
Yeah, we got a question online from Petri. When you use excavators or molding machines in the soil preparations?
Yes. If there is a plantation, it means that there's a preparation. What we don't do now, it's prescribed burning, which I think it's still done in Sweden. I don't know in Finland if you do a little bit of but of course there's a mechanical site preparation that is done each time that we have to replant the forest. So then you have the effect, the positive effect on soil, but not the chemical effect that the fire gives.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Not very frequent.
Okay. Good.
So we have to move on to the next presentation. Thanks, Yves.